Welcome to this episode of the Modern Group Theology podcast. We're so excited to be here today with Heather and Dorothy, who will be introducing themselves in just a moment. Miriam and I just have a couple of announcements before we get started. We just wanted to remind our listeners, if you would like to submit to the journal issue that's going to be coming out in the fall around trauma and resistance, please submit your pieces by the end of August. And you can find the journal page easily just by searching up the Canadian Journal of Theology, Mental Health, and Disability on Facebook. It's probably the easiest way. And then that will get you to the submission link for that. And we also wanted to sort of have a little celebratory moment and just thank all of you listeners, because our numbers are doing so well. And we saw this week that in the last 30 days, our podcast has had over 200 downloads. So that may be not a lot compared to some other YouTubers or podcasters, but for us, it's huge. So thank you so much for your continued support and your encouragement. I know for myself, like I run into people sometimes and they'll say, "Oh, I listened to your podcast. It's so nice to meet you." So thank you so much for encouraging us and supporting us, and helping us to know that what we're doing is important, because some days we're not sure. Some days we're not sure. So thank you so much to all of our listeners.
Great. And then now for Heather and Dorothy, I wondered if you might introduce yourself. Heather, you're old hat at the podcast, so maybe you can reintroduce yourself and then pass it to Dorothy.
For sure. Yeah, I think this is my third time on the podcast, which is kind of fun. It feels like I know what I'm doing finally. I'm Heather Morgan. I just finished my MDiv at Emmanuel College, and I am a power wheelchair user. I am a white middle-aged lady who wears glasses and has short hair. And today I'm wearing a comfy zip-up sweatshirt and a t-shirt. And I'm sitting in an office that has some books on the shelves to my left, and you can see a bit of the couch and some things on the wall behind me. And I am a person who lives with disabilities, physical and mental health disabilities. And I am a person who has family in both directions with disabilities. I have a mom with disabilities, kids with disabilities, and a brand new granddaughter with disabilities. So I live this disability life in all sorts of directions. And so I try to come at it from lots of different angles. So today's piece comes at it from a different angle than I've come at it before with you folks. So there's my introduction. And Dorothy, your turn.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say thank you to everyone who made this possible. I'm looking forward to this chat immensely. I'll begin, as Heather did, with an image description. I'm a 68-year-old senior with gray hair and glasses. I have a purple top on because purple is the best color. I'm sitting in my apartment with one of my original needleworks behind me on the wall, which I made during COVID for one square of every week of isolation. I'm a writer. I have published 5 books and about 50 articles and short stories. I'm a retired high school drama and English teacher and union rep. Some of that work I'm very proud of. And I am multiply disabled, have been so since birth, and have acquired new disabilities as I age, as do many seniors. I am glad that Heather mentioned this because it wouldn't have occurred to me, but I also have 2 disabled children, so who are now grown. And that is interesting because it is another intersection of disability that I will include in all of my future introductions of myself, thanks to you. So I'll just say thank you and leave it there.
Thank you so much to you both. What great introductions. We wanted to get started by inviting you to briefly summarize the pieces that you wrote for the previous issue of the journal. So I'm going to invite Heather to do that.
All right. So the piece that I contributed to this journal was actually a piece I wrote for a class I took with Amy last spring, which was very fabulous, on mental health and theology, and really, really enjoyed it. Did a bunch of different things. And we were invited at the end of the class to work on a project, very open-handed. We could do anything we wanted. What was a thing that we thought the world needed when it came to mental health and theology? And I was just at a point where my youngest child was aging out of pediatric care. And so I was thinking a lot about, what the last, between the two of them, 22 years of parenting around disability was like, and the things, not only the things I had learned from parenting my actually 3 kids with disabilities, but also the things I'd learned in all of the parent support groups that I had been part of over the years, and both the good things and the bad things that I had experienced in those spaces as someone who was also disabled myself. It's sometimes a really interesting space to try to navigate as a disabled person yourself when you're talking to parents of kids with disabilities. But increasingly, I was feeling like, there's this reality that so many of these parents are dealing with complex PTSD from their experiences of parenting these often very, very disabled children in the group that I was a part of. And so I started to think about all of the things that would be necessary for them to be able to access mental health supports and care, and all of the barriers to access that they were facing. And in the back of my mind, part of why I was thinking about this was because I was thinking also about some pastoral conversations I had had with young adults with disabilities who were trying to navigate relationships with their parents who had become, individuals with CPTSD from parenting them, and all of the dynamics that were complicated in that, and thinking like, what would it take to interrupt those dynamics, to offer a new space for relationship between parents and kids in those kinds of situations. And so what I tried to do was I tried to develop something that would overcome the barriers that I saw these families dealing with, that would allow them to access mental health resources, with the unspoken goal of trying to help facilitate deeper, better, healthier relationships between parents and kids, and parents and each other, and parents in the world at large. And obviously, I think it's really interesting that you've paired the two of us together, because both of our pieces talk about the ways in which the increasing limits on accessing respite care and PSWs and all of those things that have happened over the last 3 years, and the impact that has had. And so I'm looking at it from the perspective of the impact it has had on the mental health of these caregivers, but it has had this impact on everyone. So I think it's a real good point for us to come together on this conversation. I'm excited about it.
And Heather, I might ask you just briefly just to mention, what was the way that you wanted to actually have this thing that you created?
Yeah.
How did you get that to parents in the project?
So the idea in the project was that we would use WhatsApp, which is an end-to-end encrypted app that can be downloaded onto smartphones or used on computers. So it doesn't require a high amount of tech availability. Most families in these situations have one or the other of those devices just to be able to navigate life with their kids, and used volunteer, sort of triad system of program facilitator, group facilitators, and participants. And the idea was to build on the success of a online Facebook parent support group that I am a part of that's actually, a healthy one and a successful one. I haven't found a lot of those in my travels, but this one I'm really excited by what they do. And to use the asynchronicity available in something like WhatsApp to be able to allow families who would otherwise struggle to be there at an exact time for an exact length of time over a course of 8 weeks or 10 weeks or whatever it would be, to be able to be consistent with that attendance. And so instead uses the fact that, you can reply at 2 a.m. because that's when you're up helping your kid with his trach, or you can reply at 10 a.m. because that's when you happen to have gotten your kid finally off to school for the day or whatever it is, so that you could still be a part of it within the other balls you're juggling in terms of life.
Thanks so much, Heather. That's awesome. And I really loved your project. That's why we wanted to have you on to talk about it. And hopefully people will be more energized and think about ways they might be able to integrate it into their caregiving or pastoral ministry work. But we will come back to that. So thank you so much. And Dorothy, would you be able to let us know, just briefly summarize the piece you wrote for us?
I was a redhead, although you can't tell that now. And I think, like several other famous redheads in Canada, like Anne, anger was my default. And so when I first saw the call for this anthology, I'll confess, I was a little angry because I'm surrounded in CanLit with publishers and anthologies and journals all ready to give people ancillary to disabled people, parents, caretakers, spouses, children, the mic, and have books published by those people, many of which have gone on to win important awards. But there's very seldom room in CanLit for disabled people themselves to be the authors. I've had to fight tooth and nail over the last decade for that to be seen as important. And I think the title of caregiving also struck home to me in a way because my position on that has changed. For many years, I was very pro care work, very pro disability justice's idea of integrated shared community care. And then the older I got, the more I looked around and went, nope, nope, it's not here. I can't see it. It does not apply to me. It will never apply to me. I eventually realized, to my immense sadness. And I was also quite terrified because it's difficult to oppose a lot of the thinkers behind care work and Sins Invalid and disability justice, who I have huge respect for. But I now think on this fundamental issue, they're wrong. And so that was really hard. And this piece is my first initial attempt to say, well, here are some of the things that approach to care work doesn't include, and I'll use myself as examples. And here we go.
Thank you so much, Dorothy. And I hope we'll be able to come back and unpack a little bit of that as the episode goes on. Miriam?
Sure. I wondered if we might start this one with you, Dorothy, because Heather and realizing question 2 and question 3 are very similar, so we can have you answer them at once. But for you, Dorothy, we hope the journal is read by everyone, obviously, but we aim it towards faith communities, theological communities, and your answer resonated with me because I got into disability and theology because I only saw mainly white, middle-aged older men with a lot of privilege writing about me, and I kind of wanted to take the mic a bit away from their voices, no matter how much I admire and respect a lot of the work. It's it's important to have multiple voices. So if a church, if a community, if a theological education course pick up your piece, what would you hope they could learn from it and from this conversation?
That's an interesting question for me. I would say my first response is to respond the way that you and Amy did when I wrote you my first email and said, would you be interested in considering an article where the person doing the caregiving was also the disabled person receiving the caregiving? And you both responded with a joyous love and said, absolutely. And that was wonderful. That immediate welcome and inclusion was really important. And then I also felt that there was that I don't often feel as a disabled senior, a certain acknowledgement that, and again, this comes from disability justice, that I was the expert on the front as a disabled senior. And that many people have read a lot of articles by disabled people in their 30s and 40s, but there has not been a lot of people my age in their 60s, 70s, 80s, or 90s, and there absolutely should be. So I guess any kind of faith group in these days often has many seniors amongst them. And that is your first source of inspiration and expertise and knowledge, not educated people, not people with disability, degrees, as wonderful as that is to have. If you want to find out about the experience of disabled seniors, you need to talk to disabled seniors. So I would say that would be my advice, to use the rich experience of the congregation and of the extended parts of the congregation, and then move forward from there.
I just have a follow-up because I've been thinking about this for a while, but as seniors age, many change their abilities. Many become increasingly disabled. And there is often grief and anger and a whole bunch of emotions tied into that. Like my own grandma at one point didn't want to use a walker, and here I was, I'd been using the walker since I was 4. So I wasn't very caring when she had some grief around that, changing her ability, right? But I wonder what wisdom you would share for seniors facing that, or for community members in relationship with them.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And it is definitely one of the ways that generationally we're different.
Yeah.
I was born in 1955. I was raised by parents who were kids in the Depression.
Yeah.
That is central to the way they grew up and the way they raised me, and central to what became a huge burden of internalized ableism,
Mhm.
because the self-resistant resilience that was expected of them during the Depression, they passed on to their children and was expected of me. And the idea that you don't ask for help, the idea that
Right.
it's shameful to ask for help,
Yeah.
the idea that you're weak if you ask for help. I mean, it's capitalism's wet dream, isn't it?
Yes.
That once we get old, we should just drop dead and not use up any resources or make any requests. You know,
Exactly.
internalized ableism is a function of how capitalism values workers and
Yeah.
devalues everyone else. So that's also seniors, also disabled people, and of course, you're so right. The older we get, the more disabled we get. According to the census, at 65, 50% of people are disabled. By 75, it's actually 80%.
Yeah.
And many at that point have multiple disabilities, not just one. And my generation was not equipped, didn't know anything about that, didn't know anything about disability justice, only felt shame. And I guess when I'm talking to people my age who say things to me like, how can you possibly be proud of having a wheelchair and a walker and a mobility scooter? I wouldn't want any one of those things. And I always say, well, I really do want them because I want to be able to get out and see you.
Exactly.
And secondly, why would anybody be ashamed? I said, I wear diapers now just the way I did when I was little. It was necessary then, it's necessary now. Why would I be ashamed of that?
Yeah.
It's a medical necessity. And it's interesting to see when I talk to friends who are my age, when you start to unpack that,
Yeah.
they start to go, oh, so maybe I'm not thinking in my best interests. Ah, what a good insight. No, here's some other possible ways to look at that.
Mm.
And it's a journey. You can't push people too hard. You can't just sort of say,
No.
I've got it all solved and here's how you can solve it. You have
Yeah.
to let people go through their own journey and just give them some, breadcrumbs through the forest to maybe start headed in that direction. But I think many people want to go on that journey. So it's exciting when you can open some of those doors for them.
Yeah. Thank Dorothy. Amy?
Heather, would you like to talk to us about a faith community implementing your program? Like we talked a little bit about just needing WhatsApp.
Mhm.
What else? Let's say if there's a faith community members or faith community leaders who are listening right now and they thought, oh man, that'd be really great for us to start. We have some parents who could really benefit from this. What would be your recommendation on how to get started?
Well, first of all, I just have to say I could listen to Dorothy talk for this entire podcast and just soak up all of her wisdom and joy. And I am thrilled to be here with you, Dorothy. I think the first thing I would say to faith leaders and faith communities is something I will probably say at the beginning of the Creative Justice Conference that's happening on June 10th in Hamilton that we're doing with a deeper communion. And that is that we, a lot of times when I talk to people about disability and church, they say, well, we don't need to have a disability ministry because we don't have anybody with disabilities in our church. And so I think, first of all, you just haven't asked and you're not paying attention. And second of all, you would have more if your building was accessible, but we don't even have to go into those two things because the reality is that families like these are not ever going to be able to show up consistently to a building on a Sunday morning for church. It's not possible. It's not safe, like Dorothy has talked about. Some of these kids, if they get a cold, they could be in the ICU for a month or longer. It could kill them to get the flu, and very, very easily. So even before COVID, that was not an option. You didn't see these families in churches really ever. And so I think that the first thing is to help faith communities understand that there is a world outside of their doors, outside of their building, that needs to experience love and compassion right where they are, and to see this as an opportunity to meet those folks outside of their doors who will never ever be able to come through their doors, and to frame it that way. And that's going to be difficult for some churches to even comprehend, because a lot of churches have a mentality that says that the goal is to get people to show up in their building, and all of their ministry and all of their work and all of their effort is centered around that. These people are never going to show up in their building. That's not the point. The point is to take the love and compassion that we want to share with the world out into the world through this method. And then the second thing I would say is, it's been purposely designed to be run at the, at the program facilitator level by somebody who has some background in mental health, in trauma, in some of those resources. It's not something to put just a random person into. Select wisely, select someone who is going to be safe and who is going to be nurturing, and who's going to have the background and the resources to deal with what comes up within the group, so that they're not overwhelmed. And then the third thing I would say is use your network to tap into the broader network. Who do you know who knows someone? Who do you know who can help you connect? Because people have understandable levels of mistrust and fear and uncertainty, and you need to earn their trust. You need to earn the right to be heard. You need to do the work to make it clear that you are a safe space. You can't presume that people will assume that as a starting place. So do the work, find somebody really, really awesome to run it, and ideally, support them in doing that. And then thirdly, make sure that you recognize that this is not a ministry to get people into your doors, but to get yourself out of your door to connect to others.
It sounds like it could work as a program, as a ministry shared by many churches, and
Yeah, it would be fabulous if a group of folks who all have a passion for caring for families with disabilities were to get together and work together to run this as 5 or 6 different churches, and if those churches were willing to even put just a little bit of financial resources behind it to offer like some gift cards for groceries or some other resources that are tangible to go along with it, so that there was actually some resources to be able to meet even some of the very, very most basic practical needs, to give families just enough window to even participate in this, and recognizing how hard that is, not as a trying to buy their time, but as a recognition and a valuing of what's going on and the complexity of what they're dealing with. I think that would be really, really helpful.
Heather, if I could jump in for 1 second to something that you've said, which really went off for me. The excuse that you say sometimes you receive, we don't need disability initiatives because we don't have any disabled people, is something that I hear all the time in CanLit.
Mm-hmm.
And
I hear it all the time everywhere. In the store that has 3 steps up. Well, we don't need a ramp because we never have anyone with disabilities.
Exactly.
That's because we can't get to your door.
Yes. And what I've had many responses throughout the years, some of which could not be podcasted. But the ones that sort of have been most interesting and worked a little bit is I've looked at someone and said, I wear glasses. How many people who come to literary events wear glasses? And they go, oh, well over half. I said, well, then you've already got well over half of your population is disabled. Well, what do you mean? Glasses are assistive devices. They've just become so normalized that nobody recognizes them as assistive devices, and nobody recognizes people with glasses as disabled until they take them off, at which point it's very clear in many cases that they are disabled. And then the next thing I say to them, okay, so if you have no physically disabled people to your knowledge in the room, are you proud of that?
Right.
And I just leave it there because nobody can defend that, and I say 23% of Canada is disabled. Are you proud that you are excluding us?
Yeah.
And I just leave it there because that forces an internal moral wrestling that they have obviously managed to give themselves an escape hatch from by saying there aren't any disabled people coming. Well, you're the reason they're not coming.
Yeah.
So how do you struggle with that? And I often find that a short comment like that, and then just shutting my mouth and looking at them, is a way more effective tool than talking at them for 10 minutes, which I used to do and used to try, the teacher and me. And I've stopped doing that. And I've just tried to give the moral struggle back to them.
Which is a very good teacher move in my experience. Yeah, good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Dorothy. Dorothy, in your piece, we were really hoping you could dig in to how you talk about the politics involved in caregiving and care receiving, because there are many politics and also the need for living wages and how that fits in. Yeah.
Okay. I guess when I hear the word politics, I respond on multiple different levels. Obviously, the federal and provincial government, I outline a number of ways that provincial government has failed me over the years. And I don't think I need to explain those. My struggle to get ODSP to cover my walker, my struggle to get the PSW care that I am entitled to now that it's been farmed out and run by sort of independent organizations. I have no faith that conservative governments will ever provide anything remotely close to the care I need, because it is specifically their agenda not to. Just as I learned as a union rep, they want to cause a crisis in education in order to privatize education. The conservative governments want to cause a crisis in healthcare in order to privatize healthcare, because surprise, surprise, it gets them and their buddies rich. Mike Harris, former Premier of Ontario, he and his wife both own massive healthcare organizations. He's on the board of Chartwell. She's just founded this new private nursing care. And it goes on and on and on. They intend them and their buddies to get rich. Liberal and NDP governments would probably do a little better, but the state is not invested in making sure that we live and live well and are cared for. I don't think that absolves us from trying, because my problem with the politics of care work as envisioned by disability justice was really brought home to me during the pandemic and the isolation of the pandemic. One, I don't want 50 different people showing up at my door. I don't want the risk to them. I don't want the risk to me. COVID hangs in the air for as much as 12 hours. Anybody who came into my apartment during that time would be at risk. So nobody comes in but me and my caregiver once a week. And I absolutely do not want, after having to be on the phone constantly to try to get a PSW during COVID, I absolutely do not want to be part of the organization of care work. The way it's usually envisaged by disability justice is somebody comes and helps you with this, and then you go and help somebody with that, and then somebody else goes and helps somebody over there. No, I can't go anywhere and I can't help anybody with anything. So part of that, and my friends, even though I have plenty of them, don't look at me like I don't have any friends. I have plenty of them. They're my age and they need help themselves, or they're at too high risk to come and help me. And I would never put them in risk to come and help me. So again, that's like I said at the beginning, the framework of disability justice care work breaks down for people my age under COVID. It does not work. And I feel like a traitor, and I feel so sad to say that, because I believed in it as aspirational for so long, and I still do, but it's not going to come into my lifetime before my lifetime is over. So my position now is that we need paid, unionized, well-respected, professional, well-educated caregivers to come and provide the consistent one-on-one care to people like me. That's what we need. And we need to demand that of governments, expecting they will fail us. But we need to continue to demand it of governments, because already exhausted, older and disabled people cannot properly look after already exhausted, old and disabled people. It's not going to work. So I guess that's my best answer to politics, that it's about governmental politics and about community politics. And I respect and appreciate the number of disabled people and their close friends and family that look after each other, but that can't be where it ends, because it leaves people like me nowhere without any care at all. So there has to be some kind of way that we can continue to insist that governments provide the decent health care that Tommy Douglas envisioned for all of us.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that I myself rely on daily attending care, but you almost have to exaggerate on your assessment to get the care you need, to get the basic care you need. So, and they're poorly paid, and I've often had new immigrants who were nurses and should be nurses, right? So there's a whole lot of justice issues tied up in government funded care providers. So thank you for raising that.
Your comments raised two thoughts for me, if I can jump in.
Yeah.
One is the ongoing challenge of being disabled and trying to engage with politics when we are all tired and overworked and under-resourced and often stuck in our homes and often stuck in our beds because of lack of care and lack of mobility devices and all of those things, and the challenge of even having the voice, like it's 23% of our population, and yet our voices are effectively missing from every conversation. It's a really big challenge, and I don't raise that to say that I have any solutions for it, but just I think it needs to be named in this conversation about politics and disability and caregiving. And then the other thing is the one experience of caregiving that my family has had in the last 10 years that's been like really solid and supportive has been my daughter. My youngest went to Carleton for university this year.
They have excellent.
They have worked so hard to build a model whereby, you know, provided you live in one of the residence buildings on campus, they will have a caregiver to your space within 10 minutes, 24/7, round the clock, and she pays nothing extra for it. They have somehow found a way of integrating that cost into the cost of residence that is shared across everyone. And it strikes me that might be a way of turning capitalism into a usable model, whatever it is that they're doing. How can we take that model that clearly works, because the number of disabled students that go to Carleton proves its effectiveness, and come up with a creative way of doing this in a set of buildings or in a community of bungalows, or whatever it happens to be. How could we utilize some of those ideas to make it possible for people who wouldn't otherwise need to be in assisted living to not have to wait 2 years to go to assisted living?
Yeah, I had fantasies about nationalizing my apartment building because my apartment building is full of disabled seniors. And then we could have an on-site PSW or several on-site PSWs. Then we could have on-site physiotherapists down in the pool. There really would be all kinds of medical care on site that would be possible. And we would still have our self-contained apartments and our independence, but not be at risk and having to phone an ambulance if we had a problem. There's got to be some kind of care model between a carceral model of assisted living and you're on your own, babe. There's got to be something in the middle that would last for a lot of people for a long time until they reach the kind of care need that would require some kind of community living setting. Yeah.
Thanks so much to both of you. I wanted to just quickly mention or just sort of insert a little preview for a podcast episode that will be coming up soon. Laura McGregor and Alan Jorgensen just wrote a book about how it's called Beyond Saints and Superheroes. It's about supporting parents with children with disabilities. And I, as you're both talking, I was just thinking about, well, they'll be coming on the podcast in a little bit, but as you're both talking, I was just thinking about sort of some of the things that Laura was talking about, what she really needed because she had a profoundly disabled child that she raised at home. And she said that she really wanted the church to come in and do really sort of simple, basic things for her. It wasn't astronomical. She had just asked that she really wanted people just to come and help her fold the laundry. She really needed people to come and help her do yard work instead of just like, kind of like ringing the doorbell, dropping a casserole and running away, which is what a lot of people at church were doing. And so she really wanted the people, instead of dropping the casserole, to come in and have a cup of coffee with her. I think how I feel in these conversations, sometimes I get very overwhelmed and I think, oh, the system is so broken. There's no way the church could ever do anything. And then I need to check myself. I need to take a couple of steps back. And I need to think about what Laura wrote. And that is, we can have somebody come over and help fold laundry or do the yard work or not ring the doorbell and run away. So some of these things are, some of these ways the church can step in and help. I don't think the church can fix everything. But I think that some of these simple ways are things that are we can and our listeners can think about stepping in and helping to provide community and connection.
And I think too about what Dorothy said, like faith communities can be involved in advocacy in regard to the provincial and federal government amount healthcare budgets and other care bridges and so on and so forth. So there's always something to do. If you don't want to fold laundry, you can call your MP, or do both.
True.
So,
But if you do want to fold laundry, I've got 5 loads sitting ready to go.
oh goodness, yeah.
Oh. Well, our last question for you both is if you have any questions for each other. So, Heather, I might ask you to begin. Do you have any questions for Dorothy?
I wanted to start by mentioning that I was reading Dorothy's story and I realized we have some very distinct points of overlap, because I was also a redhead and I also had surgery at Sick Kids on my feet to try to make very twisted and very unusable feet into something vaguely usable, I guess. And although it was 24 years after you were born, Dr. Rang and Dr. Salter continued to practice in orthopedics, and I have met Dr. Salter, a very, very, very sweet man. And so I just had to put that out there. We have these points of overlap, and like you, managed to get to a point where I could, walk with a cane and then just pushing the stroller. Strollers make fabulous walkers, by the way, if you have ever in that place where you're not quite able to convince the government to get you a walker, but you still have a young child, just use a really good stroller. And then gradually my mobility has gone down and I now use a power wheelchair, but I just had to put that out there. We share some of these things, and that delights me, because I would love to share some of what I see in you in 24 years from now. I don't have any specific questions for you. I don't think. That's where my brain went when I was reading your paper. I just kept going, oh, and that, and that. Yes, I just kept seeing the similarities.
Well, that's lovely. Thank you. And I'm thrilled to know that Dr. Salter's legacy lives on. He's won every award under the sun, some prestigious medical awards. He's been made an, Order of Companion of Canada or whatever that thing is. He's won so many awards. And even 3 months ago, I was at another doctor who took my foot and looked at it and said, Dr. Salter did this? Right? And it would be literally half a century ago that man did my first surgery. And so his name lives on, and he's wonderful. And I'm thrilled that you had a chance to meet him. I likewise don't really have any specific questions for you, but I always like near the end to sort of say to people, was there anything that got left out that you would like to mention?
I don't know that what I left out belongs in the same piece. I think there's a second piece. After 22 years of being on parent boards, there are so many times when I carefully hold my tongue and I just keep going, and I leave out so much of my experiences from those spaces, because parents aren't in a place in terms of their own mental health where they can hear it, where my words could be anything other than interpreted as guilting or shaming or one more burden, which I don't want to put on anyone. But I think we do, as a society, and especially in the church, need to start having some conversations about what the impacts of our theology and our own unprocessed mental health issues have on the well-being of children being raised with disabilities in Canada. We live in a country where we have banned conversion therapy, quite rightly, but not banned ABA and IBI, which are formulated under the same principles. And use the same coercive techniques and strategies to them. But it's not just kids with autism who are struggling as a result of this. I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago with a young woman who was raised with CP, and we were talking about the immense effort and energy that is put into making sure that children walk, even when that effort to making sure that they walk with as few aids as possible results in incredible pain and steals away all of their social time because of therapeutic interventions, and then that results in social delays and loneliness and isolation and mental health issues and all of these things. And I think, you know, at the bottom of it, there's just all of this ableism that is so ingrained that parents are passing on from generations even before you, from the sounds of it. That was really helpful actually to hear your take on that. But I think what isn't in this piece is all of the rest of it, is all of the rest of the conversations that I think we do need to start having around parenting and disability that are really hard to have in a way that honors and respects the enormous effort and sacrifice and pain and loss that is there for parents of kids with disabilities, without doing so in a way that decenters those with disabilities entirely from the picture.
Right.
Yeah. So can I turn the question around and ask you what you left out?
I don't usually leave laughing out. I would guess the only thing I will say is that I am so appreciative of the work that all of you are doing. I really appreciate it. I was raised in the United Church. I was an explorer, and I look very fondly back on the warm and accepting kind of place that the church was to me when I was young. And I really do think that in COVID, nobody else is grappling with the moral questions, right? With the question of right and wrong, with the question of eugenics as right and wrong, which is what we need to be grappling with under COVID, because we're increasingly living in a cruel world where the boomer remover was actually called that. The boomer remover will cull the weak from the world. And I'm one of those people, and nobody seems to care if I get culled. So it's so important that there are spaces that look from a theological point or from a moral point, or just simply from a point of view, who does this hurt? Who does this help? How can we help? And I am appreciative of that work, and I thank all of you for continuing to do it.
Yeah, there's so much more we could dig into today, but thank you, Dorothy and Heather, for having this conversation as an example of how we can better care for ourselves and for each other, and what support there should be to make our lives possible, right? And have them seen as worthy in church and in society. So thank you, and I hope you write for us again one day, because your writing and your presence here is so much appreciated. So blessings to you and blessings to our listeners this day.